Hey everyone, it's just a little bit after 3 o'clock. We're live on Facebook as well. We're here on Zoom with a great group gathered for another town hall with Nicole Hamm, candidate for Jacksonville City Council District 4. And for those of you joining us on Zoom, please keep your microphone muted. If you have thoughts or comments, post them in the chat box. To get the controls to come up, just hover on your screen. We've got a great topic today, decriminalizing marijuana, with attorney Miguel Rosada. And Nicole's going to introduce the topic. We'll have the presentation of the topic, a little bit of discussion, and some question and answer. So just a quick recap of this week. It's been full out on the campaign trail. Early voting starts tomorrow. Nicole's been out in District 4, lit dropping and talking with residents. And yesterday, an awesome event. You can see her here elbow bumping Stacey Abrams as the Biden-Harris campaign train came through town. So I'm going to toss to Nicole Hamm now and stop the screen share and let her get this topic going.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. You're always just so great. I appreciate you. So I'm really excited about this particular topic because it is one that is a hot one, especially in Jacksonville right now. So decriminalizing marijuana. And this is recently, Garrett Dennis proposed again to have this bill of decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana possession cross his desk or cross the city council's desk, so to speak. And you know, he made a very great quote that I'd like to read. That it would allow civil citations or community service penalties rather than jail time. So I think there's a lot of confusion when you hear the word decriminalized as far as that, you know, they're just going to go away scotch-free, but there are, you know, a slight repercussion in the form of a civil citation or community service. And then Lisa and I attended an event with our members of retired and or present Jacksonville Sheriff officers. And one of them mentioned that if there was one thing in the legal system that he would like to see or could do, it would be decriminalizing small amounts in possession of marijuana. So I thought, well, why not? Like, let's talk about it, you know, and I don't know everything. So I'm so grateful that we've got our attorney and we also have a special guest, Jose, that's on the retail end of it. And, you know, in particular, specific to District 4, we have Trulieve and Harvest Cannabis, which are dispensaries on Beach Boulevard. They're at opposite ends, but those are two that actually exist in District 4. And I did a little bit of research on their revenue, and Melissa Ross actually interviewed the owner of Trulieve about a month ago, and they were speaking of how much and how many and how much traffic that these retail spaces are getting. And just to be clear, that Trulieve and Harvest, they are retail spaces that you have to have your medical marijuana card. You can't even enter the space unless you have that medical card. So just to be clear, it's not like you just walk in there and swipe your card or whatever. But I'm really excited to have Miguel and talk about this. You know, currently right now, the marijuana law is that possession of 20 grams or less is a misdemeanor, punishable by a maximum sentence of 1 year in prison and a maximum fine of $1,000. I think that's a lot. I think that's a lot. Miguel, can you help us understand why the punishment of that possession of marijuana is the way it is, and the severity of it and the impact that it has on people that are possessing or people that have a record that happen to be possessing when they're caught with that?
Well, it does sound pretty harsh. In actual practice, most people aren't going to be facing that at all. In fact, it's a first-degree misdemeanor. So they categorize crimes in different types of, I guess, buckets. You can call them second-degree misdemeanors, first-degree misdemeanors. In Florida are like your misdemeanor offenses. They're not going to require you to go to prison, right? So the 12 months is actually a jail sentence. So it would be downtown in Duval County or on the north side at the P farm. You know, I think the attitude, this all goes back to the attitudes, the war on drugs, you know, the attitude about, you know, marijuana is dangerous, it's a gateway drug. but actually, it's a misdemeanor. Possession of most other drugs is actually a felony. So it's actually less severe than other types of possession. In my experience, a lot of the first-time people, at least here, even though it's more harsh than it is in other places currently, a lot of those people are going to be referred to some sort of pretrial intervention where they're going to do some sort of community service, pay some costs, and then generally they're going to drop it. All right. If somebody has more than 20 grams, it's a felony, right? And that's where it starts to get more complicated, even though that's really compared to some of these bills or some of the places where it's been legalized, they've actually legalized way more than that for you to possess. That's when it starts getting more complicated when you have over 20 grams. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I guess like I actually just had to pull it up real fast on my computer. That 20 grams is about a fourth of a cup. So I'm not sure of what that is in different terms. As far as like street terminology, I'm not sure if that's like an eighth or a dub or whatever that is. But it's about a fourth of a cup, and I just know like from a cooker, that's not a lot to me.
It's not a lot.
And we have a question coming in, Nicole. Why 20 grams? Like, why the amount of 20 grams?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Miguel. Would you have an answer for that? That's just the current law that I pulled.
I don't have any insight why the state legislature decided to draw the line at 20 grams, quite frankly. That's not something I'm familiar with. But it really, and honestly, it doesn't take much. I think, Jose probably can tell you because he deals with it. It probably is not, it's not a lot. And then once you cross that threshold, then you're dealing with felonies, which is a lot more serious game. Than a misdemeanor. A lot of times it's not going to be a PTI. You're going to have to at least pay some sort of a fine and maybe they'll reduce it to a misdemeanor. I've seen a lot of times, but you are going to have to you're going to be entering the criminal justice system. You are probably going to be sentenced by a judge. It's not going to be a drop offense like it is for the lower levels, at least for your first time. Now, if it happens more than once, then obviously then you do start, even if it's a misdemeanor under 20 grams, you are going to start facing criminal sanctions. So I have no clue why they decided to draw the line at 20 grams. I really don't know.
Yeah, Jose, do you have any comments or feedback on that particular number?
Yeah, so I don't understand why it's 20 grams. If I'm a patient, I'm legally allowed every 35 days to have 2.5 ounces. So 1 ounce is 28 grams. 1 ounce is 28 grams. If I'm a patient, I can legally purchase 2.5 ounces, which is 28 times 2.5. It's a little over 60. But also, I'm not allowed to have more than 5 ounces at any one time. So that's 5 times 28 grams. So I don't understand why it's down to 20 grams. It should at least be the equivalent of what legal people can purchase. I think 20 grams is low. I think it's a great bill, but I think 20 grams is low and it should go higher, at least to 1 ounce. That's why I don't understand the 20 grams. I feel like that's just an arbitrary number, and we should go by the state guidelines for the state legal guidelines for people who have their cards.
Yeah, so speaking of cards, I have a very good friend of mine that has his medical marijuana card because he had cancer. And he's a regular patient at True Leave, and he even says like, man, I'm spending so much money compared to when this was not legal and he was getting it off the street. So is there something to be said with from an economy standpoint as well? Or, I mean, Jose, just kind of with the background in retail that you have for marijuana, what are your thoughts on that? Because he said, well, he's not going to go onto the street because he has the card, but he's like, there's some people that, can't afford the card. Like you said, it's an expensive intake process. And then also being able to maintain a standard price versus off what they could negotiate or get on the street.
Yeah. I mean, when you go into True Leave, you're paying top dollar for what they have. I mean, their products are not cheap, and it's because we're in the beginning of this here in Florida. That's kind of how it was in other states. In California, Colorado, it started off kind of expensive. Then we got more dispensaries, and there was more, there was more companies that went in and the prices went down, but right now everything is very expensive. Like I said, it costs about $500 a year to maintain a card and a recommendation. They call it a recommendation because it's not a prescription. So it costs about $500, and then you're going in and you're buying high-priced marijuana. So it is expensive, and I understand why people would turn to the street and not pay the $500 and pay the street prices for, I guess, not as good product, but still product, and it's still affordable. If more people could afford the process and could also figure it out, it's a little complicated, and could figure out the process, I believe everyone would get their card. Everyone would do it legally if they could afford it.
So from a since we're talking legality standpoint, what I noticed is in my research that there were a lot of people getting booked on marijuana possession after already having some type of record, and it just made the entire process of being sentenced and their punishment more than what this says. So Miguel, can you speak a little bit to how that process works and your thoughts or feedback on how that could be slightly tweaked or reformed in any kind of way?
Yes. So obviously, if somebody's had any sort of run-in, any sort of issue, what I spoke about before, it isn't going to be an option for them, basically. And so, they could have some small amount, and then if somebody has a record, a police officer can always issue what's called a notice to appear, which is like an arrest, but they give you a piece of paper. But a lot of times, if somebody has a record, or if you're in the wrong run into the wrong police officer in the wrong night, and he doesn't want to give you that break, then you're going to get booked downtown. You're going to go to jail. You're going to see a judge in the morning. You're going to be at least overnight. The judge, depending on what judge you get, some judge may release you on your own recognizance. Some judge may set a bond. It's not going to be an outrageous bond, but if you're already struggling financially, it doesn't really make a difference, does it? What I've seen, at least from a legal standpoint, a lot of cities, particularly down south, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, they tried to do what we're trying to do now with the Sydney ordinance, to give the police officers the discretion, basically, in their toolbox to, instead of initiating a criminal case, we're going to write you a civil ticket, $100, right? Or if you can't afford it, you can do some community service. And so that kind of circumvents that whole process in that situation. But in order to do that, you got to have the law enforcement, the prosecutor, you have all of them buying in, right? So in Miami, for example, I know that the state attorney there said, we're not going to prosecute these misdemeanor marijuana offenses anymore. There's obviously another reason why, in addition to these ordinances, and I believe the Tallahassee state attorney now has said they're really not going to focus on those either. I haven't heard the state attorney here say anything, and I know that at least some of our local elected officials, the sheriff, that doesn't really want to hear about the decriminalization, because there's still a state law, basically. So, theoretically, that's what they have to enforce. So, as far as I think it's a good start here, but there are movements statewide by some elected officials to introduce bills like this in the legislature. I read about it every single year, and for some reason, it always dies in a committee, despite the fact that most people probably support it. I mean, I think the poll numbers for decriminalization are pretty strong in favor of doing it. So
yeah, they definitely are. On the last UNF poll, over 60% of the people that they polled were in favor of decriminalizing marijuana, and specifically its impact on our Black and Brown communities. It was interesting when I heard that officer say that, because he kind of spoke to what you were saying. You're trying to interact with somebody without booking them away, because they've got this long rap sheet, and now instead of being able to divert and keep people out of the system, you're just kind of putting them back in, because there's almost like this this thought process of, this is what I know to survive, and this is what I know to get by and to bring some kind of income in, or I didn't get the opportunity to get my education or do something else to get back into society. So it seems like that this decriminalization could begin to shift a little bit. And I'm curious as if the concern is more on the legalities, or if it's more of the optics in our city. Because like you said, some people say it's a getaway drug, it's going to lead to someone trying more things, or this, that, and the other, or addiction and all of those things. So just from kind of your legal standpoint, do you think that it's more legal, or is it optics as far as city goes?
Probably a little both. I mean, they do have a point. The state law is state law. I get it, right? But it's a very useful thing to point to for optic purposes. So, I mean, I think that maybe their constituents don't support it, because 68% support it, 30 something percent still don't. And, that's difficult to have the answer to them. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, it is a legitimate argument to say, well, the state law is the state law. A city can't overrule that. That's not the way we're set up. The systems in place to govern us do matter. But at the same time, I think you have to be practical. You're wasting a lot of money, putting some of these people in jail for something that's really quite minor. And society would probably be a lot better off if they were able to focus on other more pressing matters. I think what this creates is essentially just another opportunity for something to go wrong if police are involved in more things instead of less things. So, but yeah, I think it's probably a little both.
Yeah, and I think everything kind of interconnects, right? So, Jose talked about like getting a medical marijuana card. Well, you've got to see a doctor if you don't have health insurance, or that visit, or you can't pay that copay. Then kind of what do you do? I think just kind of from a firsthand experience, my cousin had cancer, and even though the conversation of cannabis wasn't brought up, it was something that we circulated in our family group about, like, okay, what does that look like? Would that help? Would that be of assistance? How does that process work? And it's kind of like, well, you've got to go through the doctor, get cleared for this condition, to get the card and pay for the card, and then pay for the fee to actually go and buy the product, which can turn out to be quite a bit of money. And I saw Jose's comment that that marijuana doctors don't even take insurance. So it kind of ends up being this conundrum into healthcare and economy and civility. And like you said, and Jose said, it's complicated. This is a big issue that just has to be ripped apart in such a way. And I was actually reading about how Denver started with trying to have this ordinance passed through city council, and it ended up having to go to the state and work from the state down. And that kind of sounds like what you're speaking to a little bit, Miguel. And Jose, feel free to chime in about the economy and the insurance aspect of it. But it does seem like it has to have enough city support, and especially a state as big as ours, right? There's got to be enough municipal support to start that shift from the top down. Because like you said, even if you start it municipally, there's still the state law that you go back to, and that's where lines start to cross.
There's actually another layer too, the federal law. And I know that I guess in talked about up around Tallahassee, the state attorney there said, they were not going to focus on that. And the United States attorney for that area, the federal prosecutor in charge, basically said, we'll review it. Of course, for the feds don't want to get involved, it's going to have to be huge. It isn't going to be small. It's going to be traffickers, right? But I think it actually is higher than that. I think that it needs to start with the federal level There is some bills recently to decriminalize. Probably not going to go anywhere right now, quite frankly. But yes, I mean, the state's good. Obviously, locally, it's probably going to take some sort of ballot initiative because the politicians aren't going to do it, and they're just not. I don't think so. They have the same bill every year, and it never goes anywhere. And if you see in the whole country, the different states, how did they get it done? They passed ballot measures, and for some reason, we had 3 here in Florida, and I guess they didn't go anywhere because they're not on the ballot this time. So, and they're even trying to make it harder to pass ballot initiatives now. There's something else, which is a completely separate topic, but I think it's going to take that, and then obviously, nationally, pressure congressmen too to do something about it. So that's what I think it's going to take.
Let me just chime in. I do believe that there is city support. The citizens of Jacksonville, I think they want it to be passed. I believe that this just needs to be pushed forward. We just need to talk to our city council members so they can move it forward. It really isn't about, does the city support it? Yes. I mean, there's overwhelming research that's already done that states that the city supports it. We need to get on top of our city council members to push this Garrett Dennis bill through. It should have been pushed through last time. Honestly, I believe Gainesville already has an ordinance very similar to what Mr. Dennis is proposing here. So I think it can be pushed. I think it should be pushed. And if the city council members, if they actually took the time to get behind it, we could pass it. It's not even necessarily about, I understand like the state laws aspect and the federal law aspect of it, but we can create an ordinance. It has been done in other cities and it can happen here.
Not only Gainesville, I mean, like pretty much every major city and Sarasota have made an ordinance. Sarasota, it's not particularly the most progressive place in the world. They have an ordinance. So
say that, Sarasota.
yeah, Sarasota. So yeah, I agree with Jose. Obviously, it's a good start. It definitely presses the issue. I'm talking more from a broader perspective, but you know what? Yeah, I think it's something definitely worth fighting for. And then you got to get your people who are in charge here to buy in. And if they don't want to buy in, then you know what the remedy is. You put someone in who does buy in. So,
right. Yeah, we actually even had when we had a volunteer making phone calls, and I got a text from him, and he said, "I'm on the phone with the voter, and they're wondering your stance on decriminalization of marijuana." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he was like, that's a question between that and JEA. That's what voters are asking about to our volunteers. Like, where does she stand on JEA? Where does she stand on decriminalization of marijuana? And these are our young voters. And I think that's an important point to make out, because our young voters are going to be starting to make the decisions for the direction that Jacksonville goes in. And, sometimes I believe that the youth vote and youth voice kind of gets pushed to the side a little bit, kind of not as an established voice, but it is something that's being talked about in circles that, like you said, some of these councilmen and politicians are not necessarily in or have done the research to be a part of or in. So I just think that's fascinating. And then to actually hear a retired chief say that was something that he would like to see implemented just kind of blew the top off of me and Lisa's heads. We were like, wow, like this, okay, like we've heard it from the streets and now we're hearing it from somebody that sees the impact of it on a different side of things. So we were like, we got to talk about it and talk about it. And I think that, with Tommy Hazouri being part of, the council presidency and seeing some kind of shift, that maybe, like you said, we can get a ballot initiative for the people to decide. And I think, Jose, that's a really great point, that it is a people issue, and that would show the support or lack of support. And as we have those conversations, having public opinion and public hearing and input as we discuss those things, I think is extremely impactful. So it's 3:26. Okay.
Yeah, but a question has come in privately about, if Miguel and then Jose could respond, like the top 1 or 2 reasons why. If somebody's listening to this, why would you say to decriminalize it? Just, in a sentence form, 1 or 2 reasons, maybe Miguel first, then
I would say because the resources wasted on something minor can be better you put to something else. And number two, because the impact it has on the people who are accused, you know, someone who may be trying to get it together, they may have had a rough run and then they go right back in the system again over something minor. That's my view.
And for me, it's there is a prison not too far in Tallahassee where right across the street, there is a True Leaf. And there are people in jail for marijuana and they can see that marijuana is being sold legally. And I don't think that's right. It's also, it's expensive to be poor. And when you get even to be fined for marijuana is ridiculous to me. But when you get to that point where you're fining people and they can't afford to pay that, and they also can't afford to pay for the licensing or the certificate or the card or any of that stuff, it's just not right. It's not fair. It's not right. And I know people would do the right thing if they had the money for it.
Thank you both. So I do want to head in another direction because we are getting close to our time. And what I would love to let you guys know is that this week is Nicole's birthday and she's turning 28. So happy birthday, Nicole. And if you're so inclined, you can chip in $28 to help her get to City Hall. We're in the last few weeks of voting until November 3rd. You can start early voting tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday, and we also have a Meet the Candidate question and answer on any topic. And you can join us via Zoom or Facebook Live. And if you want to join us via Zoom, the link is in the Facebook events section of Nicole's page. Always, we need volunteers. So if you're interested in volunteering for the campaign, we'd love to have you. You can lip drop, you can phone bank with us. We do power hours together. You can also sign wave at voting locations since early voting starts tomorrow. To join our volunteer grassroots people-powered campaign to get Nicole at the table, sitting in a seat for District 4. Fill out a form on the website, NicoleHamm.com. You can fill out the contact form or the volunteer form, and doing either of those, or even, donating money, which would be nice, like for Nicole's birthday, $28, you'll receive our weekly newsletter. So vote for Nicole Hamm by November 3rd. You've got 2 weeks of early voting. And I'm going to toss this back to Nicole for a final farewell.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, thank you, Miguel and Jose, for your expertise input. I always have heard, if you're the smartest person in the room, go to a new room. And I'm so glad that I'm in a room where I can learn and really understand the things that I don't understand, because it's not the thing that I studied or worked in. So thank you all so much. And, one of the things that I would like to implement when elected is to help Garrett Dennis get this bill across the table as a city council member, and start to, like you said, Miguel, use our resources differently to really push Jacksonville forward and allow people a little bit of space and grace, which I think we could all use in any aspect of life. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Lisa. Thank you those that joined us on Zoom. Thank you, Internet, Facebook world. And we will be having our last town hall for weekly before the election. Next week is going to be a father-daughter conversation. My dad is going to join us, and we're just going to have some open dialogue. And then it'll be voting, and then we'll be having official City Council District 4 town halls that we can talk more, because we can actually do something. So I'm excited and I am grateful. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you all soon.